All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
There is no shortage of monsters to haunt our dreams.
You got red on you.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Alive! It's alive!
Groovy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another brand new episode of Oh, the Horror. It's a horror movie podcast where we take a look at classic and modern horror films from an expert and a newcomer's perspective. I'm the newcomer, Steve Allman.
And I'm the expert, Rob Holmes.
And today we are taking a look at Wyrmwood, Road of the Dead.
Yeah.
Rob, what do you think of this one?
So this movie came out in 2014 originally, right? It's an Ozploitation film. That's an Australian exploitation film.
Yes.
It is. Oh man, it parallels Bad Taste so almost to a T, right? So it took it took Kai Roach Turner and his brother Tristan Roach Turner. I probably butchered their names. It took them 4 years to get this made. This was the same as like how Peter Jackson tried to make Bad Taste, and it took 4 years to get made. And in the end, for Peter Jackson, it took the New Zealand government coming in and giving more of a budget to him. And in this case, it was the Australian government coming in and giving them more of a budget in order to complete the film. So
Right.
It's interesting to see what their first foray into filmmaking, other than short films, was going to be. I like this movie a lot, man. I think it's really well made for the fact that it was made on weekends for over the course of 4 years.
And here's the thing, like there's a lot of instances where a movie comes along and you can tell that it is it's shoestring budget, it's
Right.
tying together everything that it possibly could to like really try its best to come together, and it works. Like this movie works like in a lot of good ways.
Yeah.
It has like that. Is it the most Academy Award winningest film? Absolutely not. I'd like to refer to it as scrappy. This movie is, and not just in the terms of its its tone and its story,
Right.
but like for the sake of like what it's doing with its budget, the tone that it's representing. It's very tongue in cheek. It knows exactly what it's doing when it's having dialogue this way or having a certain it has a certain character about it that it's schlocky but earnest. It's endearing yet still not that great. I still like it quite a bit. Like it's a very, very interesting, it's a specific vibe that I'm trying to describe here. But I think you know what I'm talking about.
No, I do know what you're talking about. To me, this is one of the best independent horror films to come out in a very, very long time. When you have a budget that is that small. So originally, these guys thought, okay, we've made a bunch of shorts. If you put them all together, that's like a feature. We could do this 6 months and maybe $20,000? No, that wasn't the case. It was 4 years and $150,000. And then basically from there, the Australian government came in and gave them another $800,000 to finish the movie.
Which is a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, but when you're looking at it, this movie, when all was said and done, I think it was $1.4 million budget over the course of 4 years.
Which is just barely keeping like the gas in the tank for a car.
It's a in this movie, yes. This is the fact that they had a budget that was as small as it is, and to be able to pull off something that looks as good as it does, I am genuinely amazed.
Right. And you could, but like, let's be fair. Like, you could tell that they're cutting corners. You could probably tell that they're being, cheaper and more economic, but it's all to the betterment of what it's doing, because it's never a dollar wasted on screen.
No.
I will say that. For as cheap as it looks, never a dollar wasted.
See, I don't think it looks cheap. I think it has a cool look to it. I think they're going for that wide angle lens that has more of that. At times when I'm watching how this is filmed, it kind of has that Revenant look to it.
Very true. It has that. It's very 1970s. It's very
well. It's got this.
Like,
it's got this like fisheye lens almost at certain times when it's moving around. It also has that 1970s grindhouse approach to it. They definitely went with that and embraced it and made it gritty. I like the fact that the camera is immersive. The fact that they did a lot of crazy push-ins and cuts, very Sam Raimi, Evil Dead, Darren Aronofsky,
Exactly.
Requiem for a Dream style. There's a lot going on with this film that's great. Cheesy lines of dialogue aren't really there. There's some stuff that's a little... It never seems overly cheesy. Let's put it that way. It never seems... It's never groan-inducing where you're just like, oh, God, why are they doing this?
It's a stylized type of camp, as it were.
Yes.
Because it is very reminiscent of Evil Dead. It is very reminiscent of, like... the grindhousey Mad Maxes of yesteryear and stuff like that. It's got a lot of styles going for it. None of which I like, and this is gonna sound bad, but it's not. Like, it doesn't really seem to have a cohesive style. Like, if you could say like, oh, this is ripping off Sam Raimi, but it's the whole movie. It's not. Oh, this is ripping off so and so. It's not. But it's got like a certain shot will show this, or a certain like dialogue scene will be shot this way, and it's very different almost at every turn.
I feel like it pays homage to a lot
betterment.
of things. Yeah, it pays homage to a lot of things, but it never feels cheap. It never feels like it's going for something that it just can't live up to. There's a lot of strange elements in this that flesh it out to become a larger world. Now, Wyrmwood is going to be a TV series. That is the next step of this, and
for
it's been in development
for this creative team as well.
Right, and it's been in talks for a little bit for that to happen. The director has another film that came out recently that he's done, but I think since that's wrapped, it's going back to this, hopefully, to Wyrmwood, because I'd like to see more stuff happen with this. It's zombies, but not done in the traditional sense of zombies.
Very true, and it's at least very much a refreshing take, because the world that they're in is quite stylized and it is quite unique with the story that they're telling.
It's very
I
dark
like that
too.
quite a bit.
It is not. This is not a happy movie. It's cool and it's fun. I have a really good time watching it. But when you realize how morbid and messed up and twisted a lot of stuff that's happening, that's going on, especially in the beginning. So the movie revolves around, I think we start with a bunch of zombies attacking this barn. And we get this really cool slow motion scene of them just getting blown to bits. And this guy, Benny, talking about how his brother and friend were murdered by zombies. Like, he was, they went out there to camp and then he had to make his way through. And he asks this guy, Barry, what happened to you? And Barry doesn't want to talk about it, but we get that flashback to see that he had a normal life.
And that flashback looks different than the rest of the movie. I can see, like, I'm not saying that there's a delineation of, like, what they shot, when they shot it, because that's kind of hard to tell. But you can definitely tell, like, what sort of energy that certain scenes have and what scenes don't. And not that anything's lacking in this movie, but like they're like, okay, like now that we're back at this, like, in our 19th month, let's try something like this that they didn't think of before.
I see that as a yes and a no. I also see it as a way to differentiate time. For stuff that already has happened, you have more of that bluish tone to it. And for stuff that's currently going on, you have the warmer tones. So they go with the cool tones and the warm tones throughout for that. What I find interesting is we get this little hint of what Barry's life is like. He's a mechanic. He's got a wife. He's got a kid. Everything seems totally fine. And then the zombie apocalypse just starts to happen. So the weird part is right away they go for gas masks that they just have. So I don't know what world this is that we live in, but everybody seems kind of expecting something like this to happen. Like,
everybody's prepped, like, very quickly. Like,
no one's surprised that zombies are really exist. They're a little surprised, but not to the way you would expect them to be.
Exactly. It's very matter of fact, where you're like,
Yes.
all right, well, looks like we're doing this. We're in Australia or something like that. It's very, I don't know. Like, again, it's a conceit that I'm willing to give it because
Oh yeah.
the movie just seems game for it all.
And
I
runs
really
with
like
it.
that.
Yeah, it runs with everything. And if questions aren't answered, that's okay.
Mhm.
They don't necessarily need to be. I think a lot of what's going on in this just works. And if the TV series comes out, you can flesh it out further there.
Right.
Um,
Speaking of the look of this, let's talk about the makeup effects, where I think that's probably like the most surprisingly like high quality.
Yeah, the zombie
effect that
makeup.
we have
The zombie
going for this
makeup's
movie.
amazing. The contacts that they use are awesome. It's very gory. It's very bloody. The makeup is extremely well done, and most of the time. So Barry has a sister, Brooke, and when this zombie attack happens, she's filming something. Over, I think it's like a BDSM video or something, right? It seems like
Yeah.
that's what it is, or a photo shoot for that. And then all of a sudden, people get bit. The girl who's tied up wearing the makeup gets bit, and that's a cool zombie effect too when she's got this Day of the Dead style makeup on.
Yeah,
And all of a
those
sudden
prosthetics
she's
and like the cheeks and all that. Yeah,
Yeah, and then all of a sudden she becomes a zombie. That was an interesting way to go about it. And then all of a sudden these gas mask dudes break in and end up abducting Brooke, and she becomes kind of a guinea pig for this crazy doctor, because people either turn into whatever happened that infected people. You either turn into a zombie right away, or you just don't.
yeah.
Like, you're either immune or you're not. Well, actually, no, it's not even you're immune or not. If you get bit, but some people turned right away just from being out in the air. Some people, it seemed, when they got bit, they changed, and other people, it didn't matter what happened to them, they were okay.
Exactly.
If you had the A negative blood type, it turns out, you're fine. But if you don't, you're going to have a bad time.
Which is a very specific rule. It's a very interesting and specific rule that I'm just like, okay, well, you're probably going to be calling back to this later.
But I think it works because with that type of call out on there, and then to be able to find out that these doctors, it's like some weird experiment where this doctor is taking the people who've turned into zombies, taking part of their brain fluid or spinal fluid or whatever, and injecting it into Brooke. And Brooke starts to go through changes, and Brooke starts to develop telekinesis through zombies. Like, she can see into the minds of them and control them en masse after a while, which is it's an interesting way to go about it.
Right, and because you say interesting, because I'm like, well, a lesser movie would do this and make it seem really stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like, okay, like, I'm rolling with it at every single turn.
Right.
I'm finding myself being like, okay, all right, we're doing this now, and it's not it's never a bad thing. I'm never fully giving in to the ridiculousness of what's being put in front of me. I think it's just more of like, this is the camp, this is the style. Again, it's all of the things that Peter Jackson in his early days would have been so proud of. To immediately want to keep going forward. I really appreciate the stylistic choices, all of which to make this seem just over the top enough for me to be game for all of it.
There's a lot of stuff that they did, it seemed like, on the fly with this movie in order to make it work. One of which was when the guy we meet in the beginning who's smoking pot all the time, Chalker, he's supposed to be in the movie as the sidekick through the entire film. He's essentially Benny's character, right? Well, halfway through production, he ends up getting a role in a play or something, and he's like, I'm busy, man. I can't do this. I can't do the film anymore. So they're like, okay. And they kept shooting around it, and you're introduced to his character as he's moving through the woods. He stands still for a second, and all of a sudden, his head explodes because it gets blown off by Benny's shotgun. And then Benny appears out of nowhere. Oh, hey. Oh, are you okay? No, you killed him. And he's like, oh, is he going to be all right? And you just saw the dude's head explode.
It's so tongue in cheek. It's so very.
But it works because then it literally picks up with Benny just filling right in, like Chalker was never there at all.
Exactly. And it works twofold because it's a very huge, like, oh my god, this was a central character that just gets offed halfway through the movie.
Who we think is a central character, and it's within the first maybe 30 minutes or so.
Right.
We're introduced to him. We're only with him for 5 minutes, but we're like, oh, this is the guy who he's going to be with for the whole movie. And then all of a sudden, dead.
Exactly. And it's such a, like, it's a very good bait and switch for a fix to a interesting problem that they had, where it's just like, all right, well, we need another exposition character. Here it is. That's it. I liked that a lot. It was very clever, because it's adding to the violence. It's adding to everything that's kind of going to make this movie very raucous and out there. It was good. I really like to talk about, like, the costume design and all of these, like, other like these soldiers with all these it's such an intricately thought out, like, style of design that is very much an ode to all of these Australian cult films of yesteryear. Obviously Mad Max, obviously all of these types of doomsday types of movies. Again, I know that we mentioned, like, the Fallout games, like, last time, but again, this is very reminiscent.
It is very, this to me is almost more reminiscent of Fallout, and it takes something that we're used to in these type of films where gas is a precious commodity and takes every type of combustible fuel and makes it inert. Why?
Yeah.
Whatever happened has caused everything to become inert. But it's also done some things that video games have done. This is why I like this film a lot.
Very true.
The zombies emit methane or whatever type of combustible gas, and you see it kind of pouring out of them during the day. They find out that you can ignite that, and they start using the zombies as fuel. Basically, they put a bunch of stuff in them, and it's like that's their engine to run their car. And I think that's awesome. But then at night, the fuel isn't emitted from them. They're using it to move faster and become more vicious. And in a lot of video games, it's the zombies are okay during the day, but at night, like Dying Light, I think is a prime example of that. During the day, you can kind of fight them, but at night, you better be moving because there's almost no chance in hell because they'll tear you apart.
They literally introduced power-ups to this lore. It's a crazy type of notion, but I'm just like, are these zombies just, like, upgrading themselves every time that, like, as I'm watching that, I was like, this is, that's what they're doing.
The thing about Wyrmwood that is perfect to me, you could set it up for a video game, and you already have believable characters that have different powers. You have a guy who is a good mechanic and can build and craft things. Then you have his sister who has telekinesis and can control hordes of zombies. Then you also have to get across the barren wasteland by finding zombies and using them as fuel. But you can do it during the day, but not at night, because at night the fuel becomes inert, and then it's almost like you just have to survive. So there's so much going on with it that makes it intricate. It's not your traditional... it's not even like something of Walking Dead where, okay, we just have to... Zombies are going to come out here, and they just will always be here, and then people might show up, and they might invade and try and take our stuff.
Right, exactly.
Rinse and repeat, and that's the show. That's what that is. But when you have something where now you're dealing with a character who has telekinesis, you have the military and scientists somehow involved with this, you have people who are just trying to survive, and then... there's so much going on. It's so intricate.
Exactly. It's a fully realized world that they tried to give us here, and it works. It's spectacularly
in like 90 minutes, pretty much, or
right.
An hour and 30 some minutes. It gives us this fully fleshed world that has rules. The rules don't fully make sense, but that's okay because you can expand upon it and make it where they do, because the characters seem to just go, okay, yep, this is how things are. Let's go with it.
Yeah, I fully respect everything that it's trying to do, because again, it never gets too big for its britches, because it explains away almost everything that needs to be done.
Yeah.
It's so It's again, I respect all of its scrappiness and ingenuity for doing what it did for so long, for so little. It's really, really great. I think something that's also to note is a pretty good soundtrack, from what I'll say.
I mean the soundtrack. The soundtrack's solid. It is, yeah.
It's a bit more like, I don't want to say generic, but like it fits well with its tone because everybody is just kind of like, the movie's having a good time, and so is the music here.
Absolutely.
Like I'm reminiscent of like when, you know, they're stuck inside that lab and they're all chained up, and like he's doing that funky little dance to like, as he's about to torture them.
The second that started up, the first time I saw this when it came out, you're watching it and it's like, okay, this is pretty cool. It's interesting. The guy has to kill his wife and his kid. That's pretty dark. And then tries to kill himself, and it does not work. He's out of nails.
Straight up does not.
And it's an interesting moment, and then Chalker has to save him from himself moment. But then we're introduced to this doctor, and he just starts doing this weird, crazy dance as he's going through. And at that point, I'm like, this is a very special film. This is like a director, writer, producers who know what they're doing and know what they're getting into. They know that they're creating this gonzo, unique world, and they're not afraid to just go there. And I talked about in the last film, Jean-Pierre Jeunet and Marc Caro. This has a lot of vibes of like the movie Delicatessen, as just being strange and a little weird and just out there. You're in this kind of just different world altogether. And that's what this has a feel of, and it's just fun and strange. And the Doctor is one of my favorite characters in this, because there's that moment where he's going up to Brooke, like he's going to inject her again with something else or kill her or do whatever. Right. And he's like, I'm just fucking with you. And it's like, what?
It's a wild thing. It's a really wild thing that they're just like keep going for. And the entire way that scene's shot, like it's that like static shot to like the buzzsaw, like every time that goes, and then with like the weird energy that like it's just like he's moving with it. Like the camera movement like is so interesting in this scene. Like it's reflective of the entire movie, but like I was really taken with this scene because it's all over the place. And it still works. It still works. I'm very glad that you showed me this, because while it's not even like my favorite movie that we've had on this show, it's very much one of the most unique and one of the like more respectable types of entries for an independent horror film. Because I remember when you and I wanted to start this show,
right?
And you said, like, honestly, horror as a genre more or less sucks because about 90% of the movies in it are garbage.
Yeah.
And it's because of reasons like this where, like, kind of everybody wants to try to do it, who's an up-and-coming director or filmmaker, and they think that that's something that they can do easily when it's not easily done at all. And
not at all, no.
When you see somebody with the dedication and gumption to stick with a film and have a, like, dedicated vision for it, it's where you get movies like this where like, do I hope that these guys get to do more, because it's great that they got to finish that this came across the finish line.
Well, and there's some parts of it that are just unflinching, like when the one guy, I think it's Frank, he gets bitten, right? And he gets his wrist broken. That's what happens when they're inside of their makeshift vehicle that they've welded together into their deathmobile, right? And he gets his wrist broken, and he knows he's going to turn. And I'm expecting there to be one of those heartfelt moments where someone's, we can't do it, we can't kill you, or you go to the outside of the car and then you see the blood splatter, or you just hear a gunshot. Nope. As he's aiming the gun at him, he just pulls the trigger, blows his brains out while he's still human. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's not the type of thing that you see in a zombie movie, like
you
because
don't
it's always
see that.
Faced with those things of survival and those tough choices where it's just like, hey man, here's a completely different option. Like,
but it's true though, because I see this as like him acting how his character would really act, because he killed his wife and he killed his kid already, Do you think he's going to hesitate on shooting this guy in the head when he asks him to? He's not going to hesitate at all. He was trying to put
not at all.
a nail in his own head earlier. So that's something I really liked about this. I like that Benny does his self-sacrifice. I loved the fact that we had a villain fight at the end, a real villain fight with the captain. Who
it's straight up like a final boss fight. It's
and
crazy.
that's why I say this is like a video game film. It works well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like level after level after level thing that they have to keep going up against. And I almost think that because this movie took so long to make, that's kind of what helped it. Is that you had to keep it going, to keep it upping the ante all the way through. If you're working on something like this for 4 years, you want to keep that energy at almost a breakneck pace.
Absolutely. This does for a movie that took so long to film and complete. It never seems to lose sight of the goalpost here.
Yeah.
It never seemed to like lose its way. It never was out of left field something because it's like, all right, well, we're back in this year 3 and this is the scene that we've got to finish up now. It's very much like, okay, arrow focus, and it's not letting anything get in its way, even if it loses cast members or comes in and out of budget. It's wild. It's really, really interesting. I think to more surmise, like a damn solid recommend here. If anything, just for the like in the myriad of like low budget independent horror films that you will obviously come across in a Redbox or an on-demand situation, this is one that you should actually look out for.
Yeah, this is one that it's harder to find on something like Redbox, but anytime you can find this film, you should see it. What's funny is that I think it was around February 2015, this film had just been out for a few months. It was one of the most pirated films online.
That's crazy.
Because people had heard about it. This kind of made the underground circuit. It wasn't coming out in the US for a while, right? So I know a lot of people were just trying to hunt this down wherever they could online. And then in Australia, it became really popular over there, and people were doing the same thing because it was hard. I think you only had a limited amount of places where you could request to see it. There was exactly. Like a whole thing where you could request to watch the movie, and then you could. But I think some people just got fed up and they just wanted to see it because it's just so. This movie just pushes the limits and just goes all the way with it, and that's why I like it. I think it's not willing to doesn't really make any compromises. It just goes all the way, as far as being violent and visceral and just gritty as hell at times. I mean, I was looking at this thing. They had a little couple of notes on how much blood they used in this, and it was like 200 liters of fake blood, 50 liters of fake sweat, over 100 rolls of gaffer tape, and over like 2,000 cable ties and stuff. And that was just like a small little thing in this newspaper article that they were talking about when they interviewed the directors of this.
That's a fascinating count because it's like it gives you a peek.
Yeah.
It gives you a peek into the ridiculous amounts of numbers and prep time it goes into just a small budget film. Like we keep forgetting how much time and effort it takes just to make a movie look even this good. For the amount of effort and time and dedication that it puts in. It's really something. And like the more and more you know about what it takes to make a film, the more and more you respect when it even comes out remotely good, it took to make it that way.
Some of the slow-mo is really awesome, especially when you combine it with some of the headshots in this film. The effects work is absolutely spectacular. What they're able to do in this, I'm just super impressed with it. If somebody is looking to make a horror film and they're an indie filmmaker, you have to have this, and Bad Taste have to be on your list, because I think Bad Taste is something to look at when it was 30 years ago or 35 years ago when he was making that. And then you can look at something like this where it's okay, we're moving ahead 25, 30 years, let's see what people are able to do with modern technology and around that same type of budget,
Right. Because again, like it has quite a few modern trappings of filmmaking, like digital blood and stuff like that.
Sure.
Some CG effects when necessary. It's a toss-up really as to when they implemented it. Rather, is it like, okay, do we use it because we lack the budget, or do we spend it because we don't have the time to do something more practical? It's that kind of problem solving that is literally on screen, and you can tell that it's used effectively, sparingly, and to the betterment of like the actual movie, which, you know, again, it's adding points to its board already.
Yeah. This is one of those that, I mean, obviously this is a huge highly recommend for me.
Yes.
I almost feel like this is just required viewing for people. And if you like any Australian films or Australian horror, yeah, top of the list. Like this and The Loved Ones, I think, are my 2 top Australian horror films.
I mean, this is definitely there for sure. Solid recommend all around. And I think with that, it is going to do it for us this week. What do we got going on next week, Rob?
So we got a little double feature going on. We're going to take a look at Dead Snow and Dead Snow 2 Red vs. Dead.
I have been waiting for us to talk about Dead Snow because I've only seen half of it once, and I still don't even know if I had an opinion on it then. I think it was at a time when, you know, Nazi zombies were kind of in vogue,
right.
And it was kind of peak that trend. And I'm willing to see whether or not it holds up.
Now, are you saying you haven't seen the second one then?
No, I have not seen the second one.
Oh man, okay. Dead Snow. Well, the first Dead Snow 2009, Dead Snow 2 2014. The first one is completely, I think, Norwegian, and then the second one is split between half U.S. production, half Norwegian production.
Right.
This was Tommy Wirkola after he had done the first one, then he did Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, then he did Dead Snow 2.
Okay. Interesting.
So, but yeah, that's they're 2 very different yet similar movies. They, you know, you'll notice, you'll see what I mean when you watch them.
I'm looking forward to it. But until then, Rob, why don't you tell everybody where we can be found on the internet?
Well, you can download the podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. So that could be iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, any of those, and more. You can also find us at ohthehorrorcast.com and on any social media platforms at ohthehorrorcast and at ohthehorror.
All right. Yeah, that should about do it for us. Thank you guys again so much for listening. And thank you to all these new listeners. We've been doing a great job with some of our numbers, and we're really appreciative for you guys listening. And we couldn't be happier to hear from you guys. So thank you guys once again. And until next time, I'm Steve Allman.
And I'm Rob Holmes, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Look at me, Damien. It's all for you.
Come, it is time to keep your appointment with the Wicker Man.
When there's no more room in hell, the dead